I'm Howard Hale. Glad you could join me for today's edition of the Horseman's Corner. A couple of good horsemen with you, not nationally known, but they're excellent horsemen. Mike Brashear and Steve Sward. And let's start out with Mike Brashear. He's a Fort Lupton, Colorado horseman. Mike, the COVID kind of threw a kink in the clinic schedules for 2020. How's things looking for 2021?
Yes, sir. I'll have a few here and there. We're kind of trying to get them down to where they're a little bit more, not as big and more focused on what people are looking for, specific things instead of just kind of all over the place.
What are some of the specific things that people seem to be interested in?
It seems like a lot of the obstacle challenge stuff, the Colorado obstacle challenge deal has really taken off. I think people are really interested in the obstacle challenge. I think a lot of people are interested in stockmanship, working horses on a cow, trail riding, things of that nature, things that they can put into practice the horsemanship, things that they've learned on how to use their horses in a way that, actually using their horses with the horsemanship that they've learned on how to actually work with that horse.
Mike, you have a clinic coming up later in the summer, if I'm understand correctly, with Randy Riemann. What's the purpose of having Randy come in and put on a clinic?
I have always just loved hanging out with Randy. All of those guys that were able to be around Tom and Bill Dorrance and be around Ray Hunt. I've just learned so much from those guys. And Randy is just a phenomenal mentor and horseman. And the reason for bringing him in is, I've spent 25 years now working on my horsemanship, but it's thanks to guys like Randy that are willing to keep sharing what they're learning. And Randy's just a good guy and the kind of guy that you want to be around to help you get better with your horses.
Yeah, and the people that come to the clinic are going to learn a lot too, won't they?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Randy is also, if I'm remembering correctly, a rawhide braider and a cowboy poet.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so those are all things that have kind of been, just an interest to me my whole life. And so, that's some of the reasons that, I think birds of a feather tend to flock together. And, I like being around guys like Randy that can show you how to do things in a practical way.
What's the date of that clinic?
Right now we're kind of up in the air. You'll have to check back on our Facebook page. It's going to end up being closer to the fall now. We had a fallout with the place we were going to hold it. And so we're looking for a facility to hold that will have enough room for everybody. And the thing that's going to be great about that clinic is we're going to do it in a way that it's more of like a cowboy weekend. And so that's another reason why we're looking for just the right place to do it. Randy talked about wanting to do some cowboy poetry and maybe have a little bit of a barbecue Saturday afternoon, and we're wanting to make it more of like a cowboy type clinic, showing skills and skill sets of kind of Great Basin horsemanship.
Sounds like going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a blast. So,
what about you and your horsemanship? Where are you on the journey at this point in time?
We just finished up a stint. We helped out at the CSU's Legends of Ranching program here this last year. And, as far as my horsemanship and where I'm wanting to take myself, I just want to keep helping people that haven't been around this style of horsemanship or are seeking a better way of developing a horse that, actually works a horse, with the horse, not against him. And so those are the things that, as far as where I'm headed, I haven't really deviated. I just kind of more confident in where I want to go now with my horsemanship.
Are the young people over at Colorado State pretty receptive to the kind of horsemanship you're talking about?
I think pretty much everybody is receptive to this style of horsemanship because it's obvious. You can see the mental changes in a horse when you're working with him and not against him.
Before you do that, let's talk about that Legends of Ranching. Was it a pretty good sale this year?
It was a great sale. They had some of the, if I remember right, the averages were somewhere around 7,000 for the colts. One of the best sales that CSU has ever had now.
Well, that's good. Were there some older horses in the sale as well?
There were some from some Haythorns and Singletons, and it was just a great program. It was fun working with John Snyder up there this last year, and the other trainers that were involved, and it was fun to see the progress that all those colts made and those kids and how we all worked together. It was amazing.
Something you're going to continue to do in the future?
We'll see how that goes. We don't know what's going on from one day to the next, right now with COVID and whatnot. So, I'm open to being asked back, and if I can help up there in any way, I'm sure open to helping them. But right now we're focused on here at the house and getting horses rode here and helping the folks that come here to get some education that way, and just do what we can to help.
Hey, talk about the style of horsemanship that you practice, where you're trying to get along with that horse. Kind of give us a definition, would you?
Ray Hunt used to say that it's about working a horse through his mind, with his mind, through his body, down to his feet. And I kind of feel like if we work with horses, to me the definition of that is if you don't have to force something on something, that's a sure better way of getting him to want to be responding to you when you kind of let him find his way, set it up and let him find his way, versus, by God, you horse, you'll do what I tell you to do, or the consequences are extreme. And so there's dang sure a time when we need to ask more of those horses, but I think that sometimes if we back up just a little bit and we say, I'm gonna reach for you, can you reach for me? I think that's where the difference is. And instead of saying, by God, you'll do it this way, or else it's, hey, I'm asking this of you. Can you hunt and look for a release, which will give you relief? And when you find that, and when horses find that relief from the release, it's like a dopamine rush to those horses, and they'll keep seeking it if you allow it to happen.
And it's hard to tell how long it's going to take, isn't it, sometimes, for the horse to find the right answer?
Well, Randy shared a story with me here a month or so ago. Bill Dorrance was working with a guy that was having a little bit of a problem with his horse at a roping, and the kid was just frustrated. And Randy said that kid kind of got a little irritable and looked over at Bill and said, well, and Bill was about 90 at this time. And the kid asked Bill, well, how long is this going to take? And Bill looked at him and says, well, I've got from now on. And, so it's a simple answer, right? But it's so pointed in the sense that, it takes as long as it takes.
A horse doesn't have a timetable, do they?
No, sir. And I think that's where sometimes the disconnect happens between horses and humans, is the simple fact that most all humans have a timeline. We're especially here in the U.S., we're a country that's set on timetables, timelines, schedules. We've got deadlines. We have to meet this. We have to meet that. If we don't have him ready, then he can't go to the show, and then it ends up being into more of a money deal. And, horses, God love them because, they still tolerate us.
Mike, it's kind of interesting. When I called you last night, we were going to do this interview yesterday evening, and it was pretty late when I gave you a call, and you hadn't had a chance even to eat supper or do your chores yet because of what?
Well, I was just working on a horse. So, I've got an older horse. He's a 7-year-old buckskin horse that came in to me from a fella that lives up north of me here, up above Greeley there, and I think he's 62 or 63, and this horse has been just a little bit frightful of things and scary objects, and so this horse had come to me to kind of get a little bit more of that out of him, to be more of a solid broke for this client. And to me, there's a whole lot of horses out there right now that are trained, but they aren't real broke. And then on that flip side, there's a bunch of horses out there that are extremely broke, but they're not very trained. And what I'm looking for are broke, trained horses. And he needs some work, and he needs to be exposed to some things, because a lot of 63-year-old guys can't just crawl up on one and hope that it all works out. They need to be a little bit more solid mount. And so it was a little bit later last evening when you called, but the sun was still burning a little bit, so we had to make use of our time.
What were some of the issues that the horse was having?
Well, anywhere he goes, he's just real watchy about everything. You expose him to those things, and then turn the heat up a little bit on him in the sense of, let them know that those things can get kind of wound up, but they're not going to. Then we reassure the horse and let him know that that's all right. And then when he lets down, we go to rubbing on him, and then pretty quick, them horses get to a spot where they're like, that's not going to bother me. You have to get him to respond in that way.
Mike, time for a break. Let's do that. You folks stay with us. Going to be back with more from Mike Brashear in just a moment. You're listening to the Horseman's Corner. Bunkhouse Trailer Sales has a large inventory of Big Bend trailers that handle the tough jobs like they should, with features that every cattleman can appreciate. But they're doing it from a new location that's at Steve's Truck and Equipment between Scottsbluff and Mitchell in the Nebraska Panhandle. If you can't stop by, give them a call at 308-623-9955 or check them out at bunkhousetrailersales.com. Bunkhousetrailersales.com for your next stock or horse trailer, including the tough, practical, cattleman-friendly Big Bend trailers. And you can also find Bunkhouse Trailer Sales by going to horsemanscorner.com. Click on the trailers or type in trailers. That's at horsemanscorner.com. A lot of other good horse businesses there as well. Everything from saddles to real estate to trainers. It's all on horsemanscorner.com, plus new content 6 days a week. That's at horsemanscorner.com. Why don't you visit soon?
In today's world, our body's immune system is critical to staying alive and healthy. Find the best immunity system building products at greengoldnaturalhealing.com. My wife and I believe so much in these products that we became representatives in order to help others. Visit greengoldnaturalhealing.com. And as always, thanks again for listening, and may God bless. I'm Brashear Hale.
Hey, thanks for staying with us here on the Horseman's Corner. We're on the second segment of today's program, and let's continue with Mike Brashear. That rubbing on him is kind of a good deal for a horse, isn't it? If you rub on him at the right time.
Yes, sir. Well, and I think it goes back to the psychology, too, in the sense of, every one of the horses I ever worked had a mother. And one of the first things anybody who knows anything about horses and cows knows that the first thing that happens to those babies when they come out is they start getting licked on, a.k.a. rubbed on. And so those are some of the earliest memories. And if you know how to reassure a horse and get in there and go to rubbing on him, that early experience, I think, comes back to those horses.
And rubbing is a lot better than patting on a horse, isn't it?
Well, I tell people at my clinics all the time, and my demographic is mostly ladies, from anywhere from 8 years old to 80 plus. And you always see them up there telling them, "Oh, you did a good job," and they're patting on their horses pretty good and pretty rough sometimes. And I'll ask them, I'll say, "Now, if your husband comes home from work and he says, 'How was your day?' and you say, 'How was your day?' and then "Oh, I sure missed you," and then you go to smacking them in the cheek there and whacking on them, a.k.a. patting them, how irritable do you get? Versus if he comes up to you and strokes your hair and say, hey, I missed you, I'm glad I'm back home. What's the difference in the feeling? And, it all resonates with them. So.
Yeah, it's interesting, but that's something that people don't think about.
Well, it's just, I don't know. I think there's a time when you can pat on one, but I think that sometimes we go to an extreme, and that's what's so awesome about a horse is he just tolerates us.
No, it's kind of interesting. I know back a few years ago you went through a kind of a scary bout with leukemia. How did the horses help you get through that?
Well, the thing about a horse is he doesn't have an ego. He doesn't have anything to prove to you. And, when you are going through a kind of a deal like I went through, what's nice about it is going out there and he's not looking at you from the standpoint that you're sick, right? He's not telling you, well, you need to get to this doctor, you need to get to that doctor, you need to do this, or you need to not do that. He's just there. And to me, that's kind of was a true blessing for me, was to be able to have these horses that, you can just go cry on and then they're just there for you. And, I don't know that they know they're doing it, but I don't know that they don't know that they're not doing it, if that makes sense. And so, it was either Teddy Roosevelt or Winston Churchill that said that there's something about the outside of a horse that's good for the inside of a man. And I think that's a very, very true statement. So.
Well, isn't the other thing you have to concentrate on the horse when you're working with him, and that gets your mind off of some other things.
Right, correct. Well, and it's all about focus at that point. What you focus on is what's going to be at the forefront of your mind. And, when we get with a horse, if you're not focused on where he's at and what he's needing, the consequences on that can be dire. And so I think that's what's really good about, working horses and doing those kinds of things, is that it can kind of bring you into getting laser focused instead of like just shotgunning things. And I just think horses are great for a lot of those reasons.
We talk about pressure and release with the horse. How important is the timing of that release? And the timing of the pressure as far as that's concerned?
Sure. Well, knowing when to put a little more pressure on and when to take the pressure off is the key point. And a lot of times, I say it a lot in my clinics, and I learned this from another fella out there. And, it's not just the release of pressure, it's what he gets from the release of pressure, which is relief. And when a horse finds that he gets relief from doing the right thing, right, well, then he won't be looking to be into those difficult things. So it goes back to the whole idea of the right thing easy and the wrong thing difficult. And so, if he's doing the wrong thing, we need to put the pressure and keep the pressure there until he starts seeking the right thing. And when the right thing happens, that's when we release. And when we release, our timing of that release can create the relief, which then gives the horse I'm going to seek that because that other wasn't good.
And don't you have to give them some time to enjoy that relief before you, in other words, don't just rush off into something else?
Yeah, and so we call that soaking on one, and I think that there's a lot of correlations when you start thinking about dopamine and how dopamine works in the horse's mind and how it contributes to the good or the lack of, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like when we start thinking about that, the timing of that release in the brain, up there at school this last year, they did a deal on the timing of like a people would just put a twitch on one and go right to work, and then they can blow through that dopamine hit. And so I think that giving a horse time when you release on him and letting him soak on what you just showed him is just going to make the next time you do that, make him hunt that relief even faster.
Hey, Mike, what would you like to add that I haven't thought to ask you about?
Oh, I don't know, Howard. I just enjoy always talking to you on the phone, and these interviews are great. I think that the only thing that I would add is that, I told some kids up there this last year, I said, don't be so open-minded that you believe everything you hear, but don't be so closed-minded that you don't go and explore some other ways of doing things. And I think that we need to get better at showing people that, there is more than one way to do things, but how you go about doing those things make the difference in how the horse reacts and treats you back.
Okay, so people need to be a little bit careful, don't they, about who they kind of follow or who they look on as a mentor?
Well, I'm not one to say anything on that. I guess, Howard, some people can make up their own mind. There's people out there that are doing things that other people really like. And I may not agree with it, but it doesn't mean that maybe necessarily that what those people are doing are necessarily wrong, I guess. I was pretty blessed as a young man, 17, 18 years old, to be introduced to this style of horsemanship and get to ride with some really great horsemen my whole life. And so, my opinion on that could be a little skewed to other people because I'm pretty set in, I know what works with the horse, and I know what I got taught, and I know that what I'm doing is correct and right. And so, what I would say is find somebody that is following the right kind of practices that those kind of great horsemen put out.
And you're always learning, aren't you?
I never stop learning. I'm a firm believer that the day you think you got it all figured out, they're going to be throwing dirt in your face.
And we talk about getting the horse better a little bit at a time. You got to get yourself a little better, too, every day, don't you?
Yes, sir. One of the big things that I tell people, because, like you said, last night I was still out there riding horses and it was dang near dark. And, I'm blessed to be able to do that. And so what might take me not as long to figure out is because I get to work on it every day, all day long. And so I tell people all the time that come to work or ride with me that, if you want to be 100% better than you are today, just improve yourself 1% every single day. In 100 days, you're 100% better than you were when you started. And I'm a firm believer that you have to try really hard to not improve yourself by at least 1% a day. Most people are going to improve themselves 3, 4, 5% every day. So if you think about a year-long run, right, you figure every 90 days, if you keep working and riding your horses, in a year's time, you can be 400% better than you were the day you started in that year. And so it's just putting that out there that, seek education, seek out the right kind of education, and ride your horses. Work your horses. They're the best teacher we'll ever have.
Well, Mike, thanks a lot. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Absolutely, Howard. I always enjoy our talks, and hopefully we'll be able to get on here again sometime. And if people are interested and want to see what we're doing, the easiest way to look stuff, we've got some new things up and coming. We've got some video things in the works for this coming summer to put out there to folks, a little bit more of a how-to video deal. And we got some clinics coming up, and if anybody needs some horses rode or want to just come out and come ride with us, if you can go to the Facebook page there, it's kind of sometimes the easiest way to find me, and that's just Mike Brashear Horsemanship. And then we've got a new website getting built up right now, and that's under BrashearHorsemanship.com.
Fort Lupton, Colorado horseman Mike Brashear. You stay tuned. Going to be back with another really good horseman, Steve Sward, in just a moment. You're listening to the Horseman's Corner. Our guest today is Steve Sward. He's a trainer from North Platte, Nebraska, but you've changed locations from where you were in North Platte, haven't you, Steve? Where's your new location?
We're actually about 40 miles north of North Platte. We're up by a little town called Ringgold, out in the Sandhill.
You enjoying it out there?
Oh, we love it out there. We got a nice indoor arena, outdoor arena, and plenty of hills to go ride in.
And you got some cattle that you can use?
Oh yeah, yep. We've got some cattle to use and stuff, so that works out really well.
Steve, you got involved with the cutting horses to some degree, anyway. You still involved with them?
You know, I haven't been. Last year, due to the coronavirus and stuff, that really kind of threw a wrench in things. So we just really haven't gotten back into the swing of it, and it's still a little bit hit or miss on some of the events.
So they're still not having a lot of cuttings?
Well, they're starting to open up some of it, but certain places just it's hit or miss as to what the restrictions are going to be, to how much of it is being affected in their area at the time.
What about you then? What are you just starting colts, and you still doing some farrier work?
Oh yeah, yep. Starting a lot of colts. Actually, I've started getting a lot more of the 4 and 5 and 6-year-old horses to kind of do a little bit more refined type work on, and getting them a little bit further down the road and a little more finished.
Any particular events or disciplines that those folks are wanting you to work on with those horses?
You know, it's been just somewhat of a variety of anything from show horses to ranch horses.
Why would what's the ranch horses that they're bringing in? Why would somebody bring you a riding or a ranch horse? Are they having trouble with them bucking, spooking? What's the problems that they tend to bring to you?
Typically it's just been that they haven't probably ridden them all winter, and they're young, young 4-year-old or 5-year-old, and they're wanting just a little bit more refinement put in there and a little more handle put on them.
And that makes those some of those ranch horses with a little more handle makes them pretty valuable, I would think.
Yeah, the ranch horse, the market for the ranch horse has gotten really, really, really good.
Well, you had a thoroughbred mare that you bought a few years ago off the track. How's that mare coming along?
She is doing really well. She's probably really liking life right at the moment because we've been raising some babies out of her.
What did you breed? She's thoroughbred mare. What did you breed her to? We
bred her to a quarter horse stud, and right off the top of my head, I can't think of his registered name.
But how are the colts looking out of that big old thoroughbred mare?
Really well, really well. They've kind of took on more of the thoroughbred look to them.
So going to be pretty big, stout horses then?
Yeah, yep.
What else have you got going on that's kind of interesting at this point in time?
I recently went to a Joe Walters clinic, and that was a lot of fun. We really enjoyed it, and golly, I walked away from there with a boatload of knowledge.
He's pretty doggone good hand, isn't he?
Yes. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and boy, I can't wait till the next time I can go to him. And I was really fortunate in the fact that he was here in North Platte, so I didn't really have to travel to go to him.
What did you pick up from that clinic that's going to be valuable to you? What's the main thing that you picked up from Joe?
I took a horse there. The horse I took was one of my own, and he's an older horse that, golly, he got started way late in life. He didn't get started till he was 9 years old, and I've been messing with him for the last 2 years, and the horse was riding really, really well. I was really pleased with how he rode, but he was pretty leery of people on the ground. Just people approaching him, or, I took him to a few brandings, but it was really difficult to get that horse to go through the branding crew and stuff like that. And, I'd mentioned that to Joe, and Joe says, well, he said, let's see what we can get done here in the horsemanship. And if things don't really clear up by tomorrow, he said, you come find me. And he says, we'll see if we can get something a little better happening. And golly, within about an hour, lo and behold, that horse, a lot of that stuff kind of faded away. And the next day, I kind of had to think about what had happened. And, all Joe really did was get the horse and I more together, where the horse was keeping more track of me and I was getting with the horse more, and the horse was no longer worried or afraid about a lot of that stuff.
So he got his mind on you then rather than the other things. Yeah,
and lo and behold, the horse started seeking me out a little bit more for security, and I guess you could say Joe got me to kind of help the horse seek me out for some security.
Okay, what did you do? Anything specific that you did to make that, or to allow that horse to seek you out for more security?
Well, one of the interesting things that we worked on, the very starter, was he had all of the riders going. He said, the biggest thing for most folks was learning how to go with the horse to get the horse to go along with you. And, of course, there's a whole lot of stuff that you could take into that deal. But, the biggest thing was if he was shaping up like he was going to go to the left, why, go ahead and take him to the left. Or vice versa. If he was going to go to the right, why, go ahead and take him to the right. And then pretty soon, Joe says, now see if you can get the horse to get with you. And by golly, it didn't take hardly anything to get the horse to get with us, And I think a lot of it, the horse became more secure, and a lot of the other problemed areas were gone.
How's he been since you got him back home?
He's been phenomenal. I've ridden him a few times and exposed him to a lot of situations with folks on the ground and stuff. And I would say he's about 100 times better than what he was before.
Anything else that you picked up at that clinic that was really of some interest?
Oh, some of the ways that Joe was helping those folks kind of helped me give me some ideas on how I could help some people out, and I can't really say there was any one specific thing, but just his approach with people, there was never ABC or cookie cutter technique. It was more about working with the horse on a psychological level.
So he works a lot on, really you'd call it from the inside out then on the horse.
Yeah, yep, exactly.
What are some of the things that you can do to get that horse's attention where it should be on you? What do you feel it takes to do that?
A lot of it is just little things. If the horse, there again, if the horse was thinking about going left, Joe would tell you, take him to the left. Don't just allow him to go that way, but you take him that way. And then maybe ask for an extra stride or two over what he was maybe anticipating. So consequently, his idea and your idea become two of the same. And, you're not forcing the horse, I guess you could say, to do it.
Steve, we're just about to the point where we have to take a break, so let's do that. This seems to be a good time. But you folks stay with us. We're going to have more from Steve Sward about that horse that was 9 years old when he started him. You're listening to the Horseman's Corner. If you happen to miss the Horseman's Corner on the radio, one of the 5 daily programs, or a weekend program, you can always get them by going to horsemanscorner.com. You can also find some good ag businesses there, such as Bunkhouse Trailer Sales at Mitchell, Nebraska. It's also horses for sale, saddles, tack, real estate. It's all there on horsemanscorner.com. Great resource. Take the time and visit soon.
In today's world, our body's immune system is critical to staying alive and healthy. Find the best immunity system building products at greengoldnaturalhealing.com. My wife and I believe so much in these products that we became representatives in order to help others. Visit greengoldnaturalhealing.com. And as always, thanks again for listening and may God bless. I'm Brashear and Hale.
Welcome back to the Horseman's Corner. We're on the final segment of today's show, and here's more with Steve Sward about the horse that he had at a Joe Walters clinic that was having some issues with people on the ground. So you let him have his idea, say he wants to go to the left, but you keep on going to the left, maybe a little more than what he really anticipated. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah. Yep.
In your mind, why does that seem to work?
Well, it was interesting because I heard Joe mention one time that he said, I try to avoid an argument with my horse at all costs. But he said, I sure really try to get the horse to, if he's made up plans and going to do something, I'm going to go with him, but I sure want him to get to where he'll go with me. So, he said, boy, if he wanted to hurry up a little bit, he said, I might just hurry him a little bit more than what he wanted. He said, wouldn't have to be a lot, but just a little bit more. And he said, I would try to find a way to make use of that, And so it was just really working on the psychological side of the horse. There wasn't nothing that I don't feel like anybody could do. Anybody, I feel like, could truly benefit from it.
Yeah, and it's interesting where that horse wasn't really started till he was 9 years old. Was he halter broke when you got him?
Yeah, you could kind of sort of say that. Depends on whose definition of halter broke you were using.
Where you started him at that age, was he difficult to get started?
Not particularly. He was pretty gun shy of people and stuff on the ground, but he wasn't. He was reasonably pretty well to ride, pretty good to ride. A very sensitive horse, and still is an extremely sensitive horse. I say I've been riding him for 2 years, and I wear spurs when I ride him, but I could probably count the number of times I've touched him with a spur on one hand.
That's really interesting where you start a horse that late in life and he turns out to be a good horse. So there's a lot of horses out there then that are in that 4, 5, 6 year old age group that you could go on and get a lot done with.
Oh, definitely. And with this horse, there was a few things that took a little extra time, and other areas that didn't particularly take as much time as what you would say a 2 or 3 year old colt.
What was his background? Had he just been running out all those years?
Yeah, he'd been handled some as a youngster, as a 2 year old, and he'd been haltered and stuff. He come from a lady who had inherited a bunch of horses from her father, and the horse had just kind of fell to the wayside.
Yeah, that's an interesting situation. Hey, you used to do some work with Harmony Horse over at Denver, a place that finds homes for horses. Do you still do any work with them?
They contacted me, and we're going to do. I'm going to do a workshop for them later on this fall. I'd done a workshop for them a couple of years ago on bits and bridles and how they work and how they function, and they liked it well enough that they invited me back to do her again.
What are some of the misconceptions that people tend to have about the bits and how they function?
Most people, honestly, I think they pick up a catalog and they read whatever the little thing says that the bit's supposed to do, but they don't truly understand the mechanics of how it works. And I think that was the biggest thing that I was finding with a lot of those folks. They didn't understand where the pressure points were truly interacting with the horse and the true mechanics of it. So it was really interesting, and interestingly enough, I'd gotten a horse skull. It was real interesting to have that skull there where you could show people how that bit would lie on the bony structure of the horse's mouth.
Now, over the years, you've used a lot of bits made by an older gentleman, John Israel. His bits are kind of unique, aren't they?
Yeah, and it's interesting. John and I had a conversation here a couple months ago, and I told John, I said, out of all the bits I see on the market and everything, I said, I don't see anybody even coming close to really copying your bits. And John, he just kind of chuckled, and he says, yeah. He says, one thing that I've always kept in mind when I was building this is I wanted it to be something that was comfortable for the horse. And he said he found that he felt like most bits were there to inflict a certain amount of pain. He said, I wanted the bit to be something that the horse was comfortable with and not scared of.
What is, most of his bits have a mullen mouthpiece, don't they?
Yeah, and they're relatively a lot larger than your typical bit. He makes them out of a 5/8 tubing.
That's an interesting situation. Now, where you've used them over the years, have you found a lot of horses that really like his bit?
Honestly, majority of I've never found a horse that wasn't accepting of them. When I come across a rider that I'm not real sure of and don't really know their background, that's typically the bridle I'll have them ride with, because I'm pretty certain they can't really hurt one of my horse's mouths with that bit.
What's interesting to me is that I know I did an interview with John a few years back and asked him if he ever made any snaffle bits, and his answer was no. He just didn't.
Yeah. And, when I was down there visiting John, I spent some time with him and kind of learned how he made bits. And, something I'll never forget was he told me, he says, don't ever build a bit that you wouldn't use on your own horses. He said, if somebody comes in wanting something and you don't like the idea behind it or the concept behind it, and you wouldn't use it on your own, he says, I just wouldn't make it for him. And he said, I've stuck to that. And he said, I've always kind of kept the horse in mind. He said, I didn't really care what the riders had to think.
So, from what you're telling me, you take from a person who works with horses, trains horses, and has clinics for people, Joe Walters, and then a bit maker like John Israel. Their idea is the same. They've got the horse in mind, got his welfare first.
Yeah, yep, at the utmost, and it was real interesting. The concept and the series of the two guys are very, very similar, even though their tacker equipment be necessarily the same, but they're enjoy a conversation with one another.
So you're, excuse me, Steve. So if you got to get a chance, you're going to go to another Joe Walter clinic.
Oh, for sure.
You know, another gentleman that you've worked with a lot over the years is a guy named Bob Schaffner. Does Bob still do some work with you?
Oh, yeah, especially more so now that we're up there at the ranch. Golly, he comes out and he'll spend a week or so at a time with me.
Is his philosophy a lot like Joe Walter's?
You know, interestingly enough, they're almost identical.
But they have the same background.
Yes.
And that go ahead.
A lot of the stuff that Bob had kind of been preaching to me for years, when I went to Joe's, Joe had maybe a little different way of wording things, but by golly, it cleared up a lot of stuff for me. A lot of stuff.
Well, that's an interesting situation. What's the most interesting horse that you have to work with right now, in your view?
You know, the horse that I took to Joe's, he's of course obviously one of my own personal horses. Doesn't get ridden on a daily basis, but that horse has been a lot of fun, and probably the idea of just being able to maintain that sensitivity that horse has without killing it. You know, I feel like a lot of folks have a tendency of dummying the horse down to them rather than seeking the level of the horse, and boy, it's sure been a lot of fun trying to get to that level with that horse.
Steve, do people sometimes not take enough time to let the horse process what's going on?
Definitely. I feel that, you know, I watch a lot of trainers, and they'll work on a particular maneuver, and the horse starts to working at it and gets good about it, and without stopping and giving the horse even a 30-second break, they move right on into the next maneuver. And if a guy could just take a little time, even a few minutes, and just let the horse kind of stand there and soak and think about what and be happy about what he just accomplished.
He doesn't understand gosh, I did it right, so what's the reward?
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, if a feller was, we could say maybe working on getting a horse a little bit at spinning, why once he got pretty good at it, if we could just give him a little break and not go to spinning him the other direction immediately, why, you know, maybe the horse would feel a little bit better about himself and try a little harder for us.
Anything else you'd like to add that I haven't asked you about, Steve?
You know, I don't believe so, Howard.
Well, Steve, it's really been a lot of fun talking to you again. And how do they find you at your new place that where you're training?
You know, the best thing would be to call me because we're kind of out in the middle of nowhere.
Okay, and what's that phone number?
308-760-4708.
North Platte, Nebraska horseman Steve Sward. Good to have him with us, as well as Mike Brashear, Fort Lupton, Colorado horseman on the first half of the program. Well, thanks for joining us. We've run out of time for today's show. I'm Howard Hale, host of the program. I'll say goodbye. May God bless. See you next week. Same time, same place.